Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome back to Chapter 4. We're talking about the organelles. We're up to the mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell. The mitochondria's job is to accomplish cellular respiration. We'll talk a lot about cellular respiration in a couple chapters, and you're going to hate it. The job of the mitochondria is to make that energy molecule that I talked about earlier in this chapter. That energy molecule is called adenosine triphosphate, ATP. What the mitochondria does is it takes the food molecules that we eat, sugar, protein, lipids, and breaks them down, metabolizes them, and rips every last drop of energy out and converts the rest of it into waste that we release. It's the job of the mitochondria to turn the energy in the food molecules that we eat into this energy molecule called ATP. It's basically the energy currency of the cell. Currency is, money. If you've got, a cell phone, is your cell phone, does it have value? Yeah, a phone has value. Depending on the phone, it could have a little or a lot. But does that mean it's money? And no, my phone isn't money, but it does have value. I couldn't take this to Burger King and come out with, a Whopper meal. What would I have to do to my cell phone to be able to buy a Whopper with the value it contains? And the answer is I'd have to convert it into currency. I'd have to convert it into US dollars before I could use it. All right? And that's what the mitochondria's job is. The mitochondria's job is to take these energy molecules, that these food molecules that we take in, and convert them into a known quantity of energy. And this known quantity is called ATP. The mitochondria makes 95% of all of the energy that the cell uses by doing this thing called cellular respiration. It has two membranes. It has an outer membrane and a highly folded inner membrane. And I'll show you a picture of that in just a minute. It has an intermembrane space. What does inter mean? It means inside. No. Inter means between. So intermembrane space literally means the space between the membranes, the space between the inner and outer membrane. And it's very important, not at the moment, but it will be when we talk about cellular respiration. Inside the mitochondria, there's goop. Just like inside the cell, there's goop. The goop inside the cell is called cytosol. The goop in the mitochondria is called matrix. Inside the matrix, there is a mitochondrial chromosome, a small little section of DNA, and it is a small little circle of DNA. What was the other kind of living thing that we talked about at the beginning of this chapter that had circular DNA? The only things on the planet with circular DNA are bacteria. The inner membrane of the mitochondria is sort of similar to bacterial outer membranes. The outer membrane of the mitochondria is similar to the outer membrane of a normal cell. Inside of the mitochondria, it's got little miniature ribosomes that are a lot like the miniature ribosomes that we see inside of bacteria. Much smaller than the ribosomes we find in the rest of the cell. The enzymes inside of the mitochondria are specifically made for participating, for accomplishing this process we call cellular respiration. Here's my animal cell, and here are my mitochondria. Any given cell will have several mitochondria in them. Here's that outer membrane, and here's that highly folded inner membrane. There's goop inside of this inner membrane that's called matrix. The folds themselves are called cristae. A single fold is a crista. Outer membrane, inner membrane, very slim little space between them called the intermembrane space. This doesn't show specifically the mitochondrial DNA, the mitochondrial chromosome in here, but there is one. There's a mitochondrial chromosome. A single circular chromosome. What's the only other things on the planet that have circular chromosomes? Bacteria. What are the ribosomes like inside of mitochondria? Well, they're really small, kind of like bacterial ribosomes. What is that inner membrane of the mitochondria kind of like? Well, it's kind of like the outer membrane of a bacterial cell. What is the outer membrane of the mitochondria like? Well, it's kind of like the outer membrane of the cell. Mitochondria are found in both animals and plants. Plants have mitochondria too. Plants also have to do cellular respiration. Plants also have to eat. The difference between plants and animals is that the food that the plants eat is made by the plant in these other organelles called chloroplasts. The job of the chloroplast is to conduct photosynthesis. And as such, it has specific proteins, specific enzymes, whose job it is to perform this process called photosynthesis. Inside of the cell, there's goop called cytosol. Inside the mitochondria, there's goop called matrix. Inside a chloroplast is goop called stroma. And within the stroma, we've got a single circular chromosome. Within the stroma, we have tiny little ribosomes that are really similar to bacterial ribosomes. We have enzymes that are specific to this process called photosynthesis. The inner membrane of a chloroplast is highly folded, kind of like the highly folded inner membrane of mitochondria. The difference is that these folds are shaped quite a bit different, and these folds are called grana. And let me show you a picture of that. All right, so here we don't have an animal cell. This time we have a plant cell. Here's my plant cell. And inside plant cells, we'll have several chloroplasts. You probably can't see very well. I hope, again, you're following along on your own PowerPoint. Here's the mitochondria right here in this plant cell. Plant cells have mitochondria too. Plant cells also have these things called chloroplasts. These are my chloroplasts. Here's a big chloroplast so we can see what it looks like. Chloroplasts don't just have two membranes, they have three. They have two outer membranes, and then a highly folded inner membrane. Here are the folds of the inner membrane. This inner membrane is called the thylakoid membrane. It's highly folded into these stacks, which kind of look like stacks of nickels or stacks of pancakes. And those stacks are called grana. One stack is a granum. Several stacks are called grana. So this is one stack. These are several stacks. There is goop inside of the mitochondria. That goop is called stroma. In the stroma, we find ribosomes. In the stroma, we find a single circular chromosome. What are the only other living things on the planet that have circular chromosomes? Bacteria. What does this probably mean about bacteria and mitochondria? This is called the endosymbiont theory. Bacteria and mitochondria in the remote past, as in like before there was living things on land, before there was even anything as complicated as a fish, before there was anything even as complicated as a worm. Mitochondria and chloroplasts were probably once free-swimming bacteria that got engulfed, like we saw before, but not destroyed, but not consumed. The first one absorbed was probably a mitochondria. Whatever this free-swimming bacterium was that became mitochondria was able to take the waste products of the host cell that gobbled it up. It was able to take the waste products from that cell and make 20 times more food out of it, more energy out of it, than the host cell had. If some little leprechaun moved into your house and took the stuff you were throwing away and made 20 times more food out of it than you did, would you let him stay? If he's able to take the stuff that you're going to trash and turn it into a feast, wouldn't you let him stay? That's what the mitochondria does. The photosynthesis part, the chloroplast, was probably once a free-swimming bacterium that was able to photosynthesize, and there are today bacteria that photosynthesize. They're called cyanobacterium. That also got absorbed, probably by something that already had a mitochondria. So we're talking actually probably hundreds of millions of years later. And instead of gobbling it up like it should, it accidentally kept it. And this thing that it accidentally kept was able to take light from the sun, carbon dioxide from the water, and water from the water, and make sugar. If a second little leprechaun moved into your house and went and laid on the porch all day and then came in with a basket of bread that he made just by sitting on the porch, would you let him stay? Yes, you can bunk with the other one. This is called the endosymbiont theory, and that is that mitochondria and chloroplasts were both once free-swimming bacteria that got engulfed and not gobbled up. The first one absorbed was probably a mitochondria, and the second was probably the chloroplasts. They've got bacterial-style DNA, they've got bacterial-style ribosomes. Here we see this not quite eukaryotic cell that probably absorbed something that later on became the mitochondria. And then several million years later, several hundreds of millions of years later, it engulfs this thing that becomes a chloroplast later on. Free-swimming bacteria that got engulfed and accidentally not eaten. Free-swimming bacterium that got engulfed and accidentally not eaten.